One of the threads that we've all been following has been the gradual reopening of the economy. As we know, Georgia has started to reopen. Texas is going to be following them. And we're joined now by a gentleman who has a plan for that reopening. He is Paul Romer. He is a Nobel Laureate in economics. He's former World Bank chief economist, and now he is a professor at NYU. He's joining us from New York. Paul, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. And in your plan, as in many plans, testing is kind of the foundation here. What specifically do you think needs to happen with testing? How widespread does testing need to be before a safe reopening can happen?
Yeah, I think sometimes these macro issues are easiest to understand if you bring them down to the personal level. The question is, what is it going to take for me to feel safe going to a seminar with my colleagues at NYU, or going to get my teeth cleaned by the dentist, going to a restaurant to get a meal? The only thing that's going to give me confidence that that's a safe thing to do is if the people I'm around have recently been tested for the virus and have negative tests. And they won't want to see me in those settings unless I've been tested recently and I have a negative test result as well. That's the kind of information that will actually start to give people the confidence that it will take to return to the activities that our economy depends on.
Professor Romer, it's Adam Shapiro. How much would it cost for the federal government to maybe take over a nationwide testing program, somewhat like you're proposing? And where would they find the revenue to pay for that?
So my estimate is that if we spent $100 billion a year on testing and could pay about $10 per test, that would be enough to test everybody in the United States once every 14 days. Now, in terms of how do we pay for this? Well, $100 billion a year is a very small cost compared to the trillions that we're losing under these currently depressed conditions. We're losing $500 billion a month under the current depression. So we can afford to, in the future, pay this from general revenue, use the kind of tax options that the government has, but devote it to the measure which ends the depression and restores output back to where it should be.
Professor Romer, hi, Rick Newman here. I've reported on your plan. Has anybody from Congress or the Trump administration asked you about your plan, asked your advice about how to set this up? And how would you set this up? I mean, there's obviously been a lot of tension between the states and the federal government about whose job this is. It's kind of everybody's job, but how would you structure it?
Yep. So I think there's a pretty clear division of labor here. And I should say that, there have been people from the Congress and the administration who have inquired and who are interested in these possibilities. The division of labor is that the federal government is the only entity right now that has access to the ability to borrow. So it can spend some additional resources that we need right now. State governments always suffer from a loss in revenue, an increase in spending during a downturn, and they're very limited in their ability to borrow. So the revenue to undertake this testing has got to come from the feds. Now, in terms of expenditure, that revenue can be passed through to the states, and the governors and their public health departments could mobilize to actually implement the testing programs in the different states. And that would allow some experimentation, some customization in different states. We would learn something about some of that from some of that variation. But it is essential for the Congress to move first. The Congress has already allocated $25 billion for this purpose. That's a great first start, but we do need to, if we're going to get new people into this business, they've got to have confidence that there's a revenue stream that will continue for the next 18, 24 months. And that's where we need this commitment on an ongoing basis of $100 billion a year.
Professor, this is Dan Howley. You talk about a test every 14 days. I guess, how long does that last for? Do we, we're hearing word that this virus will be with us for maybe 2 years. Obviously, the winter, everyone suspects, will be another issue. Is it just going to be, we'll just constantly go and have to do these tests and have this funding just perpetually?
Yeah, it's useful to think about how you'd phase this in. There's a recent paper that showed that 7% of the doctors and nurses in a hospital system were actually positive at a time when the general public, the prevalence was less than 1%. So if you want to make me confident enough to go back to a hospital or my dentist to get my teeth cleaned or hospital to get an elective procedure, I think they should start by testing people there every single day. Then after, a few weeks or months of testing every day, isolating anybody who's positive, then you could scale back to maybe test once every week, maybe even eventually once every 2 weeks. If the prevalence is pretty low, testing everybody once every 2 weeks should be enough. But that may be a level of kind of surveillance testing that we should just get used to staying with for the indefinite future. Remember, this virus is called SARS-CoV-2. That's because there was a SARS-CoV-1, and there's going to be a SARS-CoV-3 and 4 and 5. We just need to get prepared for that. The number 1 wasn't so bad. Number 2 has been awful. We don't know how bad 3 and 4 might be. So we just need this capacity. And this is just part of how we protect ourselves in this modern, highly interconnected world.
Professor, one of your other areas of research has been urbanization. And I wonder, as you look at how this virus has spread to New York City, where you're based, how you think urban environments are going to have to change after this, and also just urbanization, how it has evolved around the globe with more and more people moving to cities.
Yeah. Here's a way to think about cities. I'm still very bullish on cities. Young people find New York so attractive, they're willing to put up with really extraordinary inconveniences. They'll live in an apartment that doesn't have a washing machine, or you could go, many other places in the country and have a washer and dryer right in your apartment or your house. So I think if they're willing to bear those kinds of inconveniences to be where the action is, they'd be happy to bear getting tested once every 2 weeks. Frankly, I'd rather get tested once every 2 weeks than have to live without a washer and a dryer.
Hey, it's Adam again. I have a question because we keep hearing the analogies to this being a war like World War II. So once we have a testing regime in place, whatever it looks like, what does the economy look like to you post the immediate crisis? Are we going to go back to a kind of 1950s tax policy and economic policy in this country?
Well, it will be interesting to see what the longer term fallout will be from this crisis. I think that one of the things we may see is a greater appreciation for having a competent government, a greater appreciation for having very skilled people who fill key positions in the government, who can then respond when a crisis hits. This is what we have a government for, is to manage things like this. And we may want to invest in just raising the level of the competence and skill in our government. In Singapore, the top civil servants can get paid more than $1 million a year in salary, and they're eligible for a bonus that I think can double their base salary. So if we paid salaries like that for the critical technical positions about biomedicine, about cybersecurity, about these many different threats that we faced, we could get the most talented people in the United States to work in these government positions. I think that would be an investment worth making.
The value of expertise. Imagine that. Paul Romer, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Paul Romer is a Nobel Laureate and now a professor at New York University. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.